I'm going to give you a mini tour of what the garden's looking like right now, and then we can get started on work. Otherwise, I know I'm going to get distracted because there's just so much to see. It's changing constantly, and there's a lot of really cool updates to give you. First off, I pruned back all of my James Galway roses. This variety is from David Austin. I planted it maybe 2 years ago or so, and it's grown quite a bit. It's all the way up there on the trellis. I pruned it back, I think about a week ago, and look at all these new lateral shoots coming out. So hopefully we get some really nice blooms. I have seen some of the blooms on this climbing rose, and they're really pretty. I am a sucker for soft pink roses, and I feel like these are just that. When I first planted it, I was a little bit worried because I thought they would come out a bit more cool tone pink, and I like those warm pinks. But the rose does have some warm tones to it, but then as it fades, it turns a little bit more cool toned, and it's really, really pretty. It has a bunch of petals, and the David Austin roses, I feel like have definitely taken off in the garden a lot faster than some of the other roses that I purchased at Lowe's. But that also makes sense because David Austin is a rose breeder, and I can definitely notice the difference in the vigor of the rose itself. So this one's doing really, really good. It's probably, I would say, maybe 8 feet tall right now. It starts down here and makes its way all the way up there. The avocado trees are also looking really good. This one is the Fuerte avocado, and I see some new growth starting to push through, which is really, really good because for the longest time this tree was struggling for a while, and thankfully it survived last year, and so I hope that in the next few years it just continues growing more and more. And then my loquat is also looking the prettiest that it's looked in such a long time. Look at all the new growth that's flushing out. Next to it though, right up there, you might be able to see some mango leaves. That is my fruit punch mango. It is so tall and it is growing so rapidly. It hasn't flowered yet this year, but once it does, I definitely have to show you the blooms because I think they're one of the prettiest blooms in the entire garden. And then this is a dwarf Cavendish banana. Look how lush this plant is. And it's still pretty big, like it takes up some room because it spreads all of these gorgeous leaves out. They're very lush. They remind me of sails, but it doesn't get any taller than this, which is nice because that's it. The other banana varieties that I had previously got really, really tall, and this one's perfect for any size garden because of its height. And look at all those blooms right there. I haven't seen bees around here though. I don't know if they know all these bananas are waiting for them, but I hope that we get some sort of harvest. The good thing is that it's flowering, and because I have the shade cloth up here and I have it in a little microclimate, hopefully this year we get fruit because so far I haven't been able to harvest fruit from any of my other bananas because the sun always burnt them before I could get to them. This little Cotto avocado is also looking very happy. I think it's gonna flower soon, and it's also pushing out a lot of new leaves and they look so lush and green. And this year, I don't think there's going to be very much burn on the tree at all because of the shade cloth. Last year, it went through quite a bit of a rough patch just because the sun was scorching the leaves and I didn't have the shade cloth up yet. So I would try and add bamboo stakes around it as best as I could and set up a little makeshift shade cloth, but oftentimes the wind would blow it away or knock it down. And now, look at how beautiful it looks now that it's actually protected. I also just have to show you this bear's lime tree because this is one of the original trees in the whole garden back before I thought I didn't want any trees at all. And I planted it way too deep, probably even deeper than this. It started choking itself out. It wasn't growing very well. The roots were girdling and the tree just looked sick all the time, and it's been recovering for over a year now. Last year we got some fruit, but it wasn't very much. The first year it fruited, we only got like 2 limes from it. This is a bear's lime variety, and this year it is loaded with flowers. Look at all those clusters of blooms, and they're everywhere. They're on every single branch. And then you can especially see it from here. All those white blooms are going to be open soon, and I feel like hopefully that's going to draw a lot of bees in, and that will also help out all of the banana blooms, hopefully. The bees really, really like the citrus blooms. In Citrus Alley, it's probably going to be covered in bees by the time we get there. The roses should be blooming soon as well. These are iceberg roses, and they look really pretty, especially when the arbor fills with star jasmine because there's a lot of white blooms, and the white against the green looks very, very whimsical. It just goes together so nicely. I'm going to step back so you can get a good view of the front of Serendipity. It also kind of drives me crazy seeing these portions of the tomatoes. I'm not going to plant them in that area again next year unless I can find some really good trellises for those containers, because I don't like the look of all that string. It just looks so messy to me. But it's definitely helping a bit to keep these tomatoes from flopping over. And there's some fruit to be harvested too, so I need to get to that soon. I used to do a lot of harvest videos where I would just fill up an entire basket with a bunch of produce. But lately, I've just been enjoying coming out here and grabbing what I need when I need it, because then we eat it as fresh as possible. But there are times when I have a lot of fruit ripening at once, and then in those cases, I will do just one big harvest. But I've been coming out here and harvesting tomatoes like almost every single day. Today I grabbed a couple to make some avocado toast with tomatoes drizzled in olive oil, salt, and pepper, and it was really, really yummy. And each tomato has such a different flavor, so it just tastes so good. The star jasmine isn't in bloom right now, but look how much it's covering the arbor. It looks so lush, and it's grown so much more than it did last year. So once it blooms, it's going to be such a striking sight to see. And whenever we walk through Serendipity, we get that smell of the star jasmine. It's really, really nice. This is the other original tree in all of Serendipity. It's a clementine tree. You can see all of the new growth that it's starting to push out. It looks so, so pretty. And it is also covered in blooms from head to toe, which is nuts to me because last year it bloomed, but it was nowhere near this amount. One branch of this year's blooms is probably what covered the entire tree last year. This year it has thousands and thousands of little white buds, and there's a possibility that we're going to get a really, really good harvest of clementines, which is good because we haven't been able to harvest anything from this tree since it's been planted. But it also took a long time to recover because this is another one of the trees that was planted way too deep. And look how much taller it's gotten. It's not as big as the bear's lime, but it also took longer to recover than the bear's lime, so I'm not surprised. Let me show you the tree next to it because I don't think I've shown you this variety yet. This tree is still pretty small, but it's doing really good. It's pushing out some new growth. Can you guys recognize what kind of tree this is? This is an olive tree, and this is a Frantoio olive. When I planted it, I also took, let me see if it's still here. Yep, looks like it's still alive. I also took a little cutting and just stuck it in the soil to see if maybe it would root, and it did. So maybe I'll just transplant that somewhere else in the garden. But the tree itself looks really, really pretty. It's kind of hidden back here, and it's a brand new addition. But the fact that it's pushing out new growth is making me feel super happy. And then this is the red Malaysian guava. It's looking really pretty. Now that it's warming up a little bit more, the new growth is coming out green. It's not as red as it once was, and that's going to be normal. Once it cools down again, we'll get more of those reddish purpley leaves. But for now, we're going to get a lot of these green ones, and hopefully soon we get some fruit. The fruit on this one is good, but I have to wait until it's really, really ripe. Otherwise, it's got like this little flavor that I don't like very much. It has to be like perfectly ripe. Otherwise, it's not the tastiest guava I've tried. But it is a really beautiful tree, probably one of the prettiest trees in the garden. The Santa Rosa plum took a while to drop its leaves, and it also takes a while to finally wake up. So right now it's very bare. What tends to happen sometimes is these trees will take a little while to wake up, but once they do, they start exploding with growth. So I won't feel surprised if in no time it's like covered in green foliage. It's gonna look really pretty, but it didn't bloom this year, hopefully next year. The leeks look fantastic. Look how big they've gotten. They're so, so pretty. The biggest change I did was burying them a lot deeper than I did last year and placing them in full sun. Because look at how gorgeous they are. And then this is my favorite tree in the garden right now. This is the Florida Prince Peach, and look at how many blooms it has. This is the most amount of blooms that it's ever given us. Last year we got fruit. The fruit was so delicious, and I feel like this year we're going to get twice as much fruit. And the tree itself is just looking more and more striking every single day. And then this is one of the new little trees that we recently planted. And I know that I need to stake it up a little bit just to keep it in place. I'm going to add some stakes to it just so that it has a little bit more stability because it's still a baby. And this variety is a navel orange. And one of my gremlins planted it. Look how cute it is. And then next to that we have a Pakistan mulberry. And this tree I planted 2 years ago. And this is a tree that grows really well here in the low desert. But the reason I'm so proud of it is because I have it growing in a container. in a 25-gallon container, and the tree itself is massive. And this is the first year that it's gonna give us fruit. Look at that. And there's more right here. And there's probably more spread throughout the rest of the tree, but the fruit are harder to notice right off the bat because they blend in with the foliage, and the blooms themselves aren't very showy compared to other trees like these pink blooms. But I'm hoping that we get some really nice tasty fruit this year. I'm really excited for my gremlins to try mulberries because they've never had them before. There's more leeks. This is an apple tree. This tree never lost its leaves, and I was a little bit worried about that, but it looks like it's doing fine. It's already pushing out new growth. It is covered by some basil in the front, but that's just because I try and surround some of these trees with heat-loving plants so that whenever it gets too hot, the sun doesn't scorch the tree on its own because the trees are still pretty small. And the basil will basically act like a living shield for the tree until the tree can get a little bit more mature and stand up to the heat a bit better. This is a container of garlic, another container of leeks, and this is the citrus tree that I saved for my mother-in-law's house. This is called a sweet key lime. And I hope you can see all the new growth. It looks so, so beautiful. But the thing that has me the most excited about this tree is all of the blooms that are going to be coming out soon. There's a few that are going to be close to opening up in the next few days, and hopefully we get some production from this tree. This tree went through a huge change last year. It was uprooted from the ground after many, many years, probably like 10 plus years old. And I cut off a bunch of its roots. I planted in this container that my mother-in-law gave me. And then I pruned off a bunch of the branches as well because I knew that the amount of roots it had left wouldn't be able to hold on to everything it had going on top. And look at how much growth it's put on. It is looking beautiful. Not only is it growing, it is flourishing, it is flowering, and it is happy. This is a desert gold peach, and it is flowering, not as much as the Florida Prince variety, but it's flowering nonetheless. So I'm excited about that, and I'm grateful to get any fruit at all because this tree definitely got quite a bit of sun damage last year, especially towards the end of the summer. All of the tips were basically scorched, and there was a point where I thought I might lose a tree, but thankfully it pulled through and it's hanging in there beautifully. There's a lot of onions growing over here. Soon they'll start bulbing. And then these are some of the new citrus varieties that we planted. So this is a clementine. Look how pretty. And as you can see, it's trying to make fruit right now. So once it starts flowering, it's most likely going to drop the fruit. But if it tries to hold on to any of it, I will be taking it off because the tree is so tiny. The trunk is so skinny. My finger is thicker than the trunk, but that's how a lot of the trees in Serendipity started out. So it'll thicken up in no time. And then this variety is a thornless Mexican lime. That will make this my third lime or lemon tree in the garden. I have an improved Meyer lemon, a variegated pink Eureka lemon tree, a Bear's lime, and now oh wait, so I have four. So I have four trees in the garden, lemons and limes, because we use a lot of it in ceviche, guac, really everything. Whenever we make any broths or anything, we're always adding lemon or lime to them. And I also want to make sure that I have different varieties just so I can taste different flavor profiles. I also am trying to grow potatoes in some of these smaller containers, and it looks like it's working so far, but we'll have to see what the actual harvest looks like in a few weeks. This is the asparagus. Last time you guys saw it, it was all yellow, so I cut all of that back, and it's already grown quite a bit. And I accidentally also snapped off one of the asparagus spears, and we tried it and it was so sweet. Oh my gosh, it was so delicious. And now we've had these other spears growing in. I'm not gonna harvest them yet just because, I mean, I guess maybe I could. They're really yummy, but I want to see if I can hold off until next year, and hopefully we get a much better production. And I didn't plant any more asparagus crowns this year. I was planning to, and if I come across any at Lowe's or Home Depot, I'll pick some up and I'll plant them. But I just didn't start any from seed. I haven't seen any at my big box stores, and I didn't plan ahead enough to purchase any online. So I'm happy with the ones that I have. I definitely wish I had more, but there's always next time where I can plant them. This container is empty right now only because that's where I'm going to be planting the other citrus tree. But over here we have an apple tree. I'm thinking maybe eventually I might also just move some of these trees around because I want all of the deciduous trees to be in Aurora Boulevard. But because I've added so many citrus, I have citrus scattered around everywhere, so I'll see. This is an Anna apple tree that I planted from Tractor Supply as a bare root, and it is looking beautiful. I think I bought this one for like $15, $16. Yeah, you see, $14.99. And I have stuff in there because my cats were getting in there and digging up the soil. So I've been putting random things in there just to keep them away. But the tree itself is looking so much better. Over the summer, I almost lost this tree because a rat was biting through the irrigation and it hadn't been getting water for I don't know how long. It was really hot and I kept coming out here and I was like, what's going on? This tree was doing so good and all of a sudden it's very wilted. The leaves just look so sad. And then one day I decided to tug on the irrigation line and there was no tension on the other end of it. And I realized that it was completely bitten through. It was not getting watered at all. So I hand watered it, reset up the irrigation, and now it's looking beautiful. It never lost its leaves during the winter time though, so we're definitely not going to get fruit this year. Maybe next year. I just really want it to put on some growth. And as you can see, this area of the garden starts to get quite a bit of sun because there's no shade cloth here. But within the next week, I plan to put more of the white shade cloth. And I also plan to remove all of the black shade cloth and switch it out for the white so that it's all one solid color. And I think that's definitely going to help with the growth of some of these plants as well. This is a ruby red grapefruit. This tree is massive. Oh my gosh. This is a pigeon pea tree. But back there, that's the ruby red grapefruit variety. And it has a ton of new growth. I don't see any blooms on it yet. So hopefully we get some, but I also need to go through and harvest the fruit that it has right now. Maybe that's also going to help it put on new blooms. Oh, did I also show you this one? This is a variegated pink Eureka lemon and it is flowering, but it's been trying to flower ever since I purchased it. We bought this one at Costco maybe like 2 years ago and the trunk was also like skinnier than my finger and now it's a little bit wider. Oh, let me pull that out of there. But I haven't let it fruit even though it has tried because I wanted the trunk to mature a little bit more and I wanted the overall tree to just get a little bit more mature because it was very fragile when I first planted it. And it looks really pretty with all the blooms on. You can barely see this one, but this is another citrus tree. The variety is called Murcott Semi-Dwarf Mandarin. I bought this one at Lowe's as well, and this is a new planting that my gremlins did this year. But then next to that, I have an improved Meyer lemon tree. And this one is covered in blooms. It's not as tall as some of my other varieties. I think this year it's probably going to put on a little bit more height. But it is beautiful and it is one of the most productive trees in all of Serendipity. And especially in all of Citrus Lane. The next citrus tree is a Caracar orange. This one is also pushing out quite a bit of foliage and a few blooms. Definitely not as many blooms as some of my other citrus varieties, but last year we got maybe 5 or 6 really good sized fruit. Look at the size of that one. It's just that the fruit aren't ready yet because I had 3 left. I harvested another one maybe like a week and a half ago and it wasn't ready yet. It was sweet, but you could still tell that it could have used a few more days or maybe like a few more weeks or so. And the thing with citrus is that once you harvest it, it's not going to continue ripening. So I'm trying to hold off as much as possible so that we can get a really good, sweet piece of fruit. And look at the blooms. This is how my clementine would bloom. A few blooms here and there. But you have to search for them because the tree's not covered in them. Not yet anyways, but maybe in a year or so. The tree next to it is a blood orange. This is a Moro blood orange and it has not given us fruit. It has not given us many flowers. This year I'm seeing some growth, but I don't see any blooms yet. I genuinely don't think we'll get very much from this tree yet, but I've heard that this variety takes a while to fruit sometimes. In the meantime, I have a lot of other citrus varieties that are getting ready to fruit, like this Valencia orange. This one I planted as a tiny little tree start, and look at those branches right there. Aren't they so pretty? It definitely has a lot more blooms than it did last year. It doesn't have as many as some of the other varieties, but it has a really, really good amount for the size of the tree and the age of the tree because it's one of the newer plantings. Look how big it is. And then in this container, I have a lot of herbs growing, but I want to plant a few melons in there as well, or maybe some Armenian cucumbers or something. Here I have some artichokes, and this is my Mexican cream guava, which is looking so pretty. It got a little bit of frost damage, very, very minimal. It's going to recover in no time, and you can already start to see it exploding with growth. And I think it's going to do even better once I put up the shade cloth, because then it's not going to have full blazing sun scorching it as well. And I did try some of the fruit last year. I didn't notice the fruit until it was on the floor though. So I got to try it. It was amazing. But I wish with all my heart that I had tried just a little bit more, because it was so sweet and so creamy. And you know, with some guayabas, you bite into them and the seeds can be a little bit tough. With these, there was absolutely no toughness, or like you weren't biting down on too many seeds. It was just so, so good. Definitely one of my favorite guavas I've ever tried. This is my burgundy plum. Last time I showed you this tree, it wasn't even asleep yet. It was holding onto its leaves. Some of them were starting to fall and turning yellow, but now it's bald. It's so bare. And I know it's going to start shooting up with new growth in no time, but I miss the leaves. I miss them so much. This tree I planted as a bare root. I bought it from Willis Orchard, and it's been doing fantastic. It's several feet tall, basically as tall as the guava, even though it was planted way after the guava. In this container, I have a lot of sweet peas that are finally starting to take off. Let me harvest one of these. And oh, look at this one. I planted all of these peas here because my plan was to have them protect Frederick passion fruit, or Fred, from getting any winter damage. And it worked. First of all, it didn't get as cold as I thought it would, but you can see the passion fruit down here. It's pushing on some new growth. It's still hanging in there. I thought I had seen some of those caterpillars on it, but who knows, maybe I was wrong. It doesn't have as much foliage as I wish it would, but I know that in the next few weeks that's going to change. And as long as it made it through the winter, I know it can most likely make it through the summer, especially once I put up shade cloth. In this next container, I have a lot of fava beans. I've never grown fava beans, but I wanted to try and grow some for my sister. And I also wanted to see whether I like the taste or not. Plus, the plants themselves look really, really pretty. And I've seen videos of the blooms, and the blooms also look very whimsical. Next to that, I have a triple crown thornless blackberry, and it's looking really pretty. The canes are looking so nice. I don't see any fruit yet. In the meantime, I just want it to continue becoming more established, and then I'll keep training it up this cattle panel. And I recently tied back this climbing rose from David Austin as well. It's called the Lady of Shalott, and it looks really pretty. It did give me some blooms last year, and I think those are some of my favorite blooms as well. Usually I tend to stick to pink blooms, and this is the first time that I bought a rose that was more of like a peachy salmon color, and those blooms are so gorgeous. Now I feel like they're one of my new favorite colors to gravitate towards. They're warm, they're inviting, they look like they're straight out of a fairy tale, and they're very romantic. This is the same climbing rose over on this side. My peace rose is looking great. I need to come in and prune some of this dead foliage, but for the most part, it's looking really, really nice. This container has a Mexico La Grande avocado, and look at that new foliage. How pretty. It is looking so, so beautiful. I can't wait to see this tree flourish, because every time I look at the burnt pieces, it makes me so sad. But then whenever I see the new growth, I'm like, yes, you're a fighter. I knew you could make it. I'm rooting for this little tree because it's been through a lot. Here I have some chickpeas, some garlic, and then some herbs. I need to plant something in this one soon. But I also want to show you the dragon fruit. These are Ecuador Palora dragon fruit, and when I purchased them, they were teeny tiny little plants, and it took them a while to start growing a good amount, but I recently tied them back. I know I need to separate these a little bit more, but I just wanted to get them upright. I have some more over here. You can see that beautiful new growth. Hopefully I get it to the top of the trellis this year, because every other year the sun has scorched it, or my cats try to climb it and they break off pieces of it. So I have them surrounded, and I hope that they're able to make it all the way up this year. I have had other varieties that made it to the top, but again, something would happen, like the sun would cook the plant, or my cats just really love to climb them, or just to scratch into them. And so they would leave really deep gashes. And so I feel like the plant would put out 1 foot of growth and then be cut back like 1.5 feet of growth. Next to that is a pineapple guava, looking so, so pretty. This tree has not fruited yet, and it better, or else it's gonna get the boot out of the garden. I'm just kidding. It's a really pretty tree. It works great as an ornamental. The flowers taste really yummy, so If it doesn't give me any fruit this year, I'm gonna start eating all the flowers and I'm just not gonna worry about fruiting at all. Okay, no, that's not true. I've heard that these take a while to fruit as well, so maybe that's all it needs is just more time. But every single year it's put on more and more blooms. It just hasn't been able to turn them into fruit yet. And the variety is a Coolidge variety, so it's a self-fruitful variety, so I shouldn't need a pollinator. But I do know that with a lot of pineapple guavas, you do need another pineapple guava to cross-pollinate. I don't think it can do the same thing with regular guava trees, but I'm not 100% sure, so I don't know. This next citrus tree is an Owari Satsuma, and this tree I feel so bad for because my husband bought it at Costco for me, and I love it because it was a gift. But look at the root system. It's a little bit gnarly. It's not the prettiest thing. And the poor tree was hidden amongst the pomegranate and the pineapple guava, so it wasn't getting as much airflow or as much sunlight as I would have liked, and it didn't grow as much as it could have last year. So I pruned back the trees next to it, and look at how much growth it's putting on. I think it's even trying to flower. You can see some of the blooms right there. There's not a ton of them, but there's a couple. But this tree is definitely not going to hold on to any fruit this year. And even if it tries, I won't allow it to because the trunk is still not as thick as I would like it to be. I want the tree to mature a little bit more and to put on some more branches and foliage. Otherwise, it's going to put all of its energy towards fruit instead of growing. And I need it to grow. Next up is Parfianca pomegranate. And last time I showed you this tree, it wasn't leafing out yet. And look at it now. It is so pretty. Within another week or two, it's going to be completely full again, and then hopefully soon we get fruit. Here I have the dwarf tomato variety. I don't know what the name is exactly, but it's still doing really, really good. And then next to it is my Eden climbing rose. And the Eden climbing rose is looking really pretty. I can see some new shoots coming up there. So I can't wait to see what the growth looks like this year. There's even a few canes trailing down over here. I need to attach it. Next to that is my soursop tree, looking more beautiful than ever. I can start to see some new growth coming in right here. This tree was a seedling when I first planted it, a tiny little thing. It didn't come with any soil or anything. Oh, let me see some of these older leaves. It doesn't even drop its leaves, huh? Even the older ones, it likes to hold on to everything. This tree I planted as a seedling that I bought off Etsy, and it took a while for it to take off because my baby was removing some of the leaves. She was yanking it out of the container, and I was scared for a hot minute that the tree just wouldn't make it here. The first winter that I had it inside of my garage in the grow tent because I wanted it to survive. And this past winter was the first time that it was out in the garden. I covered it with some frost cloth and it's been doing so great. It did take a little bit of frost damage one night when I left it uncovered by accident, but for the most part, it's been doing really good. It's alive, it's growing, it's healthy. During the summer, I was really worried that it would get a lot of damage, but it didn't. It surprisingly took the sun pretty good. It did have shade cloth for a good portion of the summer, but even before the shade cloth went up, I was always really worried that I was going to lose the tree, and it's been strong. It's been really good. Look how pretty it is. So I cannot wait to someday get soursop. This tree means a lot to me because I planted it for my husband. He was obsessed with the soursop flavored humics. So I decided to look for a tree and try growing it myself. And I don't know if there's other people growing it here in the low desert. I saw one channel where they were growing a soursop, but I think eventually they might have let go of it. I'm not 100% sure. I haven't seen any recent updates, but this one's been good for about 2 years now. Right? 2 years, I would say, maybe around there. And it looks beautiful. Seeing how much it's come in 2 years is a great accomplishment for me. And hopefully the more mature it gets, the faster it'll grow, especially when it's in a little microclimate. Next to that is a Carmen avocado. And this one means a lot to me as well because when I first received it, it was taller than the dragon fruit trellis. It was actually really, really big. And it was a gift from my sister for Christmas one year. And the reason she got me this variety is because my mom's name was Carmen. Last summer, it got so much sun damage to the point where the tree started dying back quite a bit. So I cut it all the way down here, just a few inches above the graft, and it survived, which makes me feel so relieved because whenever I lose any plant in the garden, especially a perennial, It makes me sad because I know every single one of these plants. I've seen them grow up from tiny little baby plants, but it especially hurts me more when the plants are gifted because those I try really, really hard to baby and take care of and protect. And whenever I'm not able to keep them alive, I feel like crying every single time. So I was really worried for a very long time with this one. I kept thinking I was going to lose it. And I know trees are very expensive, especially when you purchase them online, and especially varieties like this. And so I'm so relieved that it made it. This is my sunshine blueberry, and look how many blooms it has. This one is, I've had this blueberry plant for a few years now. Eventually, I might plant another one. I haven't yet just because this one just looks so pretty, and we've gotten blueberries from it. They're really, really tasty, and every single year it blooms more and more. Last year, I chopped it down quite a bit because it was starting to sprawl all over the place. But the good thing about this variety is that it doesn't get too big and it doesn't get too large, so it's perfect for containers and small gardens. And then I have a bunch more plants over here. I think I covered the majority of this portion of Serendipity. But you see what I mean? Like it starts turning into a whole garden tour because there's just so much to see. But I'm going to take you into the heart of Serendipity now. These are the containers that I'm talking about. I bought 2 more packs at Lowe's and added a few more to the garden just because I got recommendations from you guys whenever I plant peppers to have their branches, I think, touching or holding hands, something like that. I forget the exact term. But I want to plant a bunch of peppers along the border of the garden. The main reason being that we eat a ton of peppers, but also because I lost a bunch of them last year, especially during the summer. So hopefully if I plant them a lot closer together, not only will I be able to grow more food, but they'll be able to withstand the summer heat a little bit more. I already filled up some of the containers with soil and a lot of kitchen scraps inside, but there's still a few that I haven't gotten to. And some of these peppers I need to prune back because they have some of the sun damage still on them, and everything here is set up on drip. And I've been trying to brainstorm some sort of trellis that I could attach to the wall so that I could hold some of these peppers and eggplant back, just because they look really pretty, but sometimes I feel like they start flopping into the pathway, and I don't want that because, well, honestly, one of the main reasons is I'm really paranoid that there will be a hornworm on there and I'll like brush against the hornworm and it'll fall down and I'll accidentally step on it or it'll fall on me. I know it's probably a very irrational fear, but I just don't want a lot of foliage draping into the pathways. Plus, I like seeing where I'm walking because I don't want any scary surprises waiting for me on the floor. When I was getting ready, I told you guys a little story about how I'm not 100% sure if I did step on it or not, but there was a dead mouse in my front yard, and I found a dead rat in the garden once and I almost stepped on it. It was actually over in this area a long time ago, and so now I want to make sure that the pathways are always clear of any debris, so I want to sweep these up and I don't want anything draping over just in case. Also, I've never seen a snake in the garden, but just in case there any snake or reptile or anything ever comes in here, I want to make sure I know where I'm stepping. You can see one of the containers full of kitchen scraps right there. I just need to top it with soil. I have a little compost bin in my kitchen, and whenever it fills up, I come out here and I dump it in the garden. This is what I was going to tell you before I started rambling on and on. This pepper used to just drape onto the pathway. It wasn't looking the best, and I just feel like it doesn't look as tidy. So instead of setting up a trellis, what I started doing is I started tying it back and attaching it to the wall using these little, I don't know what those are called. These poultry net staples. I'm using these to attach it to the wall. And I'm using this size. So all I do is I attach these to the wall right here, and then I take some cotton twine and I tie my peppers back, and it's been working beautifully. That way I don't have to set up a whole trellis, and as the peppers continue growing, I can just continue attaching them wherever I want. I have some carrots right here. Those are looking really nice. Some squash is popping up, and then I have some eggplant, and I've been doing the same thing to the eggplant as well because that was also flopping into the sidewalk, or the pathway I should say. And then you see the exact same thing happening over here. I feel like that's such a simple but very effective solution, and you don't notice it right off the bat. It just kind of looks like the plant is just in place, and as the plants continue filling out, it's also going to help hide all the strings attaching it to the wall. Let me come back to this side of Serendipity. So that's what this view looks like right now. And then this is the view of the tropical section. You can see a lot more of the mango tree. A lot of the newer foliage is starting to turn that dark green color, so I'm very happy about that. The variety is Fruit Punch, and you can see how full it gets. It starts cutting off the pathway. I don't mind quite as much though because it's really nice when there's mangoes dangling down right here. And for my gremlins, doesn't this look like it would be such a whimsical area to run through? For me, because it's a little bit taller, it can be a little bit annoying, but I like to sometimes look at the garden from the point of view of a gremlin. This would be such a whimsical place to run through and play around and use your imagination. I just think it looks so beautiful. You can see the loquat a lot better as well. Look how tall it is. And you can get a little peek of the avocado. Next, I'm going to show you the first garden bed. Here I have a bunch of tomatoes. This is one of the garden beds that I want to make sure to trellis up because the tomatoes are growing very, very fast. And a lot of them are starting to hang on this side. So if I don't use string to keep them in place, I feel like some of these branches might break off. And because there's a lot more blooms, I don't want to sacrifice any of my fruit. So I need to get that done ASAP. And last year I was growing some ube here and it died back. You can see it right here. It died back when it got really, really cold, but I'm hoping that it pops up soon. If not, I'll stop by Lamb's and I'll replant it because I really want to try ube, like homegrown ube. This is gonna be the tropical garden bed, but all of the banana pups that I transplanted last year unfortunately didn't make it. So I started planting a few different brassicas in there and they are looking amazing. They were growing kind of slowly during the winter time, especially because the shade cloth was up, but now look at them. They're huge. The leaves are so, so beautiful. I don't remember exactly what these are. There must be a tag in there somewhere, but I mean, they look pretty regardless. And then this is the oldest pepper tree in the garden now. I had a serrano that was a little bit older, but I lost it last summer. And this one, I don't know what variety it is. I think I bought the start for $1 at the Arizona Worm Farm. I planted it in here, completely forgot about it, and then it started growing. And it grew slowly and struggled for a long time, but every single year since then, which has only been like the last 2 years, but once it started taking off, it has been such a reliable producer. And those are the peppers that I usually string, and I have some saved in a jar, and I still have some from last year's harvest that we've been going through slowly, but I'm happy that it's going to start producing some fresh ones because these I use in everything that I would use a regular jalapeno or serrano in. They're a lot smaller, but they're very, very spicy and very, very good. And I've had a lot of people tell me different things they could be. I don't know, they always look a little bit different to me. Either way, it's a really beautiful pepper tree. I cut it back significantly last year, but in a few weeks, it's probably going to cover up this whole portion of this garden bed. And then this is what the trellis looks like right now. I think I have a pumpkin or a squash growing up right here. And this one made it through the winter time. Usually it wouldn't be here anymore, but I left it in the ground hoping that maybe it would give me something and that it would stay alive until it warmed up, and it did. And it's pushing out some very, very pretty growth. When I look at these trellises, I feel like a bird could have made these. They're just so, so pretty. The middle garden bed is guarded by these towering coral vine. It definitely took quite a bit of frost damage on a lot of the leaves. The good thing is that this coral vine is still alive and I see some new growth starting to shoot out. So in no time at all, we're not going to even notice any of the damaged leaves because it's going to be completely full of new foliage. And I didn't cut these back. I've seen a lot of other gardeners that grow these here in the low desert cut them back after they bloom and then they flush out new growth, and I could have done that, but I just never got around to it. And so I'm just going to leave it alone and see what happens. And if I don't like the look, then next year I'll make sure to cut it back. It looks even prettier when it's all green and when all the blooms are cascading down. But that's what it looks like right now. This is the root vegetable garden bed that I planted with you guys, and you can see how full it is now. I didn't plant this one. It's self-seeded and I just let it do its thing. And then a lot of the peas are starting to climb up, but I definitely need to come in here and give them a little nudge so they can start climbing up the trellis. And then in a few weeks, it's gonna get a little too hot for the peas and I'll just replace them with melons or something. Because I think these trellises are gonna look so pretty with melons dangling down. I know what that looks like because I've seen it before in the garden, and every single year it looks very different. I could plant the exact same seeds, but every single year the trellises are going to look just slightly different, and every single year I fall in love with them more than the prior year. The good thing about these trellises, and the main reason I wanted to add the grapevines, is because usually when they're bare, they don't look bad. but they just look way prettier when they're full. And I feel like with the grapevines, they don't look bad even when they're bare. I feel like this just looks so whimsical. When winter comes again and I don't have anything growing on here, I'm not gonna feel bad. I'm gonna feel like, wow, the grapevines just look so, so magical. Just looks very, very romantic. This garden bed is full of eggplant. You can see a few of the fruit there and a whole lot of kale. And I think I also have some broccoli growing in here. Those haven't started producing yet, but they will soon. The kale is looking really good. That's going to be used in almost every dish. From tofu scramble to soups to spring rolls. I just like adding greens to everything, and kale is one of the most delicious greens in my opinion. This trellis right here had a bunch of climbing beans last year. You can still see some of the dried pods up there. And usually I would have cut them back, especially once they looked like they were starting to die off on their own. But I've learned that with beans, if I just leave them, as long as the weather permits it, a lot of them will just start coming back to life and pushing out new growth and kind of get their second wind going. And so you can see some of the older leaves here, but you can also see a bunch of new ones, and it's starting to flower again. So I'm glad that I didn't get rid of it. One thing I have done though is I will climb up, get some of those pods up there, and I just drop them back into the soil so that they can start sprouting and climbing up again. You can start to see some new ones right here. Ooh, but you know what? Why does that look like there's aphids around here? Aphids are starting to find my cool leafy greens. I need to come through and spray some of these guys off. The rest of this garden bed basically has a bunch of eggplant, which is good because eggplant is quickly becoming one of my favorite vegetables, especially in stir fries. It gets really, really tender, and I've already harvested several of these. We've been having them every single week, and there's still a bunch more that will be ready soon, and a lot more flowers as well. You almost can't tell because of the eggplant, but there's also celery in there. I haven't harvested it, but my kids want ceviche later this week, so I might come and grab a few of those. And then there's some more brassicas in here, and even some radishes that are flowering. So I think I'm just gonna get rid of these because honestly, I don't really need them. A bit too shaded, so they came out very wonky. But I'm gonna clear this up because I can just plant some heat-loving crops here, like okra or something. This is what Arch Rose Claire looks like right now. And I want to show you, number one, so that you can see how much the roses have grown since I pruned them back, but also so that you can see what it looks like right now at the beginning of March versus what it'll look like at the end of March once the grapevines start waking up. Because the grapevines grow so quickly here that in a matter of weeks, the trellises are not going to look this bare. And once summer fully hits, the tunnel is going to become like a very private, secret area. And at night, it looks gorgeous when it's lit up with all of the string lights. The roses are definitely growing very, very quickly. One of the biggest mistakes that I made when I pruned them is I got rid of a ton of the lateral canes. And that's where I get my blooms. So down here it's going to be a little bit bare. I'm hoping that a bunch new shoots start coming out, but at the same time I'm not freaking out like I normally would, because no matter how many mistakes I make with pruning and doing a bad job is a lot better than doing no pruning at all. And the canes that I did keep, I think they look gorgeous. Like, look at the size of this one compared to this one. And even if I sacrifice some blooms along this portion, I know that the top is finally going to be cascading with red blooms. You can start to see a lot of the buds forming. But I can't help and wonder what it would have looked like if I hadn't pruned off all of those lateral canes that I did. I regretted it so much. I felt like that scene of Interstellar when he's like, "Don't let me go, Murph, don't let me go." That's exactly how I felt. I haven't started editing the video, but I know that when I'm editing it, it's gonna sting because I realized that after how big of a mistake I'd made by pruning off all of those lateral canes, and I kept beating myself up over it for a few days where I was like, why didn't I just look up a tutorial to refresh my memory before I went in with the pruners? But it's a little bit too late for that. Now all I can do is remember it for next time. And honestly, I feel like this is how I remember things in the garden a lot more, because I've watched so many tutorials of people pruning roses and training climbing roses, and every single time I forget until I go into the garden myself and I make my own mistakes, and then I make sure not to make those mistakes the following year. So my pruning was not the best, but we're still gonna get some roses, and next year I know it's gonna look even prettier. I also want to show you the grapevines because I don't think they're waking up yet, but they will soon. Once they start looking kind of fuzzy, I know that it's gonna be a matter of time before they start waking up. Wait, I spoke too soon. Look at that. They are waking up. Oh my gosh. I am so sorry. I should have checked first before I started talking. But this variety is the flame seedless grapevine. And I have one on this side and I have one on this side. Let's see if this one's waking up. Oh, yep, this one is as well. Except the shoots on this one don't look as pink as the other one. This grapevine I bought from Walmart for around $5 to $6. Oh, I think I even see a leaf up there. Do you see that? I know it's kind of hard to tell from here, but oh, they're alive and they're awake. This is the first time that I noticed this, but when I pruned that grapevine up there, it started leaking this like watery fluid. And at first I thought maybe it was rain droplets that it was holding on to or something, and they were barely falling down, but that doesn't make sense because that water would have evaporated. And then I learned that it's a phenomenon that happens with grapevines. And I forget what it's called. I don't know if it was they're bleeding or they're crying, something like that. But grapevines, maybe, I think it was bleeding grapevines. Basically, it happens right before they're about to wake up fully. And it happened for a few days, and there was actually a puddle on the floor. Not a puddle, but like the pavers looked wet from where it was leaking every single day for a few days, and then one day it suddenly stopped, and now we have leaves popping out. So that's nice. I also want to show you what it looks like from this angle, just because you can see the roses a little bit more, and you can start to see all of the lateral shoots coming up right here. I'm happy with the way I'm training them. I just wish that I had been a little bit more careful with my pruning last time around. And the last grapevine over here is a Thompson's green grape. And I'm not 100% sure whether this one has woken up yet, but I do see some swollen buds. And I know that I didn't do the best job at pruning this one. When it comes to cane pruning, I feel like that one really confuses me, but I feel like I'm getting just a little bit closer. The canes that I kept this time are still a little bit too mature for my liking, but hopefully we get some production from it. I just don't think we're gonna get the best production I could have gotten had I done a better job pruning. From this one right here, I think we're gonna get a good amount of grapes. And then this one also I feel like it was a little bit too old of a cane to keep. You can tell from just this alone how much it's peeling, like it's a really old cane. Versus this one looks like a brand new shoe. It's not that thick. I feel like the thickness on this one is perfect. Next winter, I'm gonna work really hard on improving my cane pruning so that I can get a lot more fruit from this variety as well. But I do see some swelling buds up at the top, so hopefully it starts leafing out soon. Moving on to these back garden beds. This one is full of tomatoes. I think that's kind of clear to see now. These tomato plants are reaching about 9 feet tall at this point. They are massive. And they're really just being held up by 3 tomato cages from Gardner Supply Company. It's kind of hard to tell though because they're hidden inside of the garden bed, but the whole thing is just full of tomatoes, and then there's a few brassicas and celery and stuff at the bottom. Broccoli too, actually. I see some heads forming right there. But the majority of the bed is just covered with tomatoes. And I've just let them grow wild because at this point, I feel like there's no way I can get this stuff under control. I might come in a few weeks and just open up some airflow. And this is one of the reasons that I didn't start any more tomatoes this year. Because if I take a step back, look how huge that is. Look at this pathway. There's gonna be so many flowers and so many tomatoes just dangling down everywhere. And the tomato cages are doing a really beautiful job of holding everything in place. Look at these. Berries, crazy cherry. Haha. Yummy. I didn't purchase those tomato cages though. Gardner Supply was really kind and sent them out to me to try out. And I love them. I've been using them for about over a year now. I've tried them in different sections of the garden. I've used them inside of containers. I like them a lot more inside of garden beds just because I'm able to walk all the way around them. If my containers weren't up against the wall, I would also really like them for containers, but they fit more the 25-gallon containers. The other ones I think are a little bit too small for them. But in the garden beds, these perform beautifully. You can see how huge these tomato plants are. And if it wasn't for those cages, those would be all over the floor. they're holding them up great. They've held up in the Arizona summer, so I'm gonna pick up some more myself. But if you're looking for a really good trellis that you don't have to build yourself, those are some really good ones. They are a little bit pricey. I would say those work really good in small and large gardens. I feel like they're a little bit of an investment depending on what your budget is. For me, they're definitely going to be a little bit of an investment, but I know that they work. So I'm more than happy to support Gardener Supply, especially because they gave me the opportunity to try them back when I couldn't afford them. So I'm really happy about that. And then I also have a lot more tomatoes climbing up this arch trellis that I made out of remesh panels. So this is what the trellises look like whenever they don't have the grapevines. And I think they still look really pretty, especially when they fill out with vines, because the wire can hide very easily and it kind of disappears and makes the vines look like they're floating. So I don't mind this look at all. I think it looks stunning. But adding the grapevines does add a lot more interest. Plus, the vines are then climbing on this versus metal, so it doesn't feel as hot. But also, it just makes them look a little bit more whimsical whenever they're not covered like this. Because before they had all these tomatoes growing on them, they did look a little bit more plain. Once they start filling out though, they look magical. And I have quite a bit of tomato plants on here as well. And they're holding them up great. And there's also a bunch more blooms. So I know all of these tomato vines are going to get a lot heavier in the next few weeks. But I think that these trellises are going to hold them up perfectly. They've held up multiple melons, so tomatoes should be no problem for them. The tomatoes are starting to sprawl though, and they're starting to creep onto the rest of the garden bed, so I definitely need to get them in check. This is the other trellis, and this one is covered in peas. Oh, this is a really good one. Look how pretty that is. Oh, I love peas. I harvest some of these every single day. Every single day. And this one also looks really, really pretty. The peas are almost all the way to the top, so I'm just going to tie them back. But I also know that in a few weeks, the peas are going to be done because it's going to get too hot and they're going to start getting powdery mildew. In the meantime, though, I've got a bunch growing everywhere. Last year, I was growing a lot of Armenian cucumbers on this trellis, and I loved the way it looked. One thing that's definitely helped me out is just attaching it to T-posts instead of wood. These trellises are not going anywhere. They're super, super sturdy. This last garden bed is a garlic bed. It is covered in garlic and it looks so, so pretty. I have different varieties growing in here. I planted them with you guys actually. So I'm really excited for the time when I come in to harvest them. And then here's what I wanted to show you. Look at this tomato. Look at that big old missing piece. I don't know if that was the birds or if that was a rodent, but I don't see any bite marks on it. So I have a feeling it might have just been birds. I need to get rid of it so that rodents don't start coming in here. And then I also need to tie everything back so that we get a wall of tomatoes right here as well. And then, oh, it just looks so pretty. I love how the garden looks. I don't think I showed you everything else that was in here, but we have a few more root vegetables and kale and a few brassicas hiding in between the tomatoes. And then I have a few carrots that I sprinkled in there as well, alongside some lettuce. This is where I usually come to harvest lettuce from whenever we're making spring rolls. Last but not least, I need to show you Fig Alley. Ugh. Keep in mind, I already let you know I kind of neglected this area, so it's going to be a lot messier than the rest of the garden. But today we're going to fix that. This is Fig Alley, and the first tree you see is a tropic white guava. This tree I pruned back recently, and it is looking really, really beautiful. The reason I pruned it back was number one, because it was getting really, really tall, and it was also starting to drape a little bit onto my neighbor's side, and I don't think they mind, and they can always prune it back if they feel like it's in their way, but I just didn't want to inconvenience them, so I went ahead and pruned it back a little bit myself so that I could keep its size under control. And I also pruned it back because once I saw a video of someone saying that with guavas, they fruit a lot more on new growth, not older growth as much. So I figured if I prune it back, hopefully that's going to give it a little jump start so that I can get a good amount of guavas this year. Because last year we got some guavas, but I didn't really get to try any of them because the birds got to them before I could. And the year before that, I did get to try some and they were so good. The guava taste is so much more pronounced than the ones that I buy at the store. But the ones that I buy at the store are usually always a little bit green and underripe. And these were so sweet and so ripe. Oh, I love them so much. So I can't wait to harvest some from this tree. But it's also why I want to plant a few more guava trees in the garden because they just taste so, so yummy. Next to it is a lemon guava. This is Lenny. And this tree was crooked for so long. It had a lot of scorching. It was very sparse in some areas, so I pruned it back, and look how much it's starting to leaf out. It's looking so much fuller already. And I think the shape also suits it a lot better. So I can't wait to see what this tree looks like by the end of the year. The one thing to keep in mind about this guava variety, at least here in Serendipity, is that it tends to get a little bit more sun damage compared to some of my other guava varieties that can take full sun, like the Mexican cream and this tropic white, and even the red Malaysian. It did get some sun damage, but not as much as this one. This one, I thought I was going to lose at one point because it was just so scorched. All of the fruit was completely burned, the foliage was burnt, the branches were burnt, but the tree bounced back. So hopefully it's starting to adjust a little bit. Once the fig trees start leafing out, they help to shade it out a little bit more, which is one of the reasons I wanted to keep them a little bit taller this year. But if I find that it's not working, I might need to move it to a different portion of the garden, somewhere where it'll just like the microclimate a bit more. Next to it is a Florida Prince Peach. This is the first tree that I ever grafted and the only successful graft I've ever had. And this year we got 3 blooms from it. These are a little bit older and more spent, and I don't know if it's going to hold on to any of the fruit. I kind of don't want it to, just because I want it to get a little bit more mature and I want the trunk to thicken up. So that's my main focus this year. So if it does start to grow some of the fruit, I might just take it all off. I mean, there's only 3, so I won't feel too bad. Plus, the other Florida Prince Peach is loaded, so it'll more than make up for this one. And then next year, I'll let it fruit. The rest of Fig Alley is nothing but rare fig varieties. I don't know which variety each of them is exactly because I have them mixed up. Some of them have the tags, right? Bourgeois Gris, I think is what this one says. Bourgeois Gris. The fig trees are doing really, really good. They woke up a lot faster than I was expecting them to, and even though I pruned them back, I didn't prune them as short as I did last year because I recently root pruned them, so I feel like I'm going to let them put on a little bit more growth. And I can already see not only foliage, but new fruit forming. Look at that, which makes me feel so excited because the earlier I can get them to start fruiting, the sooner we can harvest figs before it heats up too much. And I haven't attached shade cloth to this side of the yard, but my husband said maybe I should, just to protect these trees because he really wants a lot of figs this year. Some of the fig trees though are barely starting to bud out and leaf out, but it's really only a matter of days before the trees are like covered in green. This one's taking a little while, but it should be good, right? You can see the buds starting to swell, so that's always a really good sign. I don't think I lost any of them over the winter because it wasn't a cold winter at all. There's new leaves popping up for this one. This one, there's a new growth starting to break through. It even has some of the old figs still on there because it started dropping the leaves before some of the fruit could ripen, so it is what it is, but I'm excited for this year because every single year the figs just get bigger and better. Look at this one. Oh, that's really, really pretty. One of the reasons I love Fig Alley so much is because it is covered in these huge fig leaves. Like the ones that you see right now are pretty small. They're going to get a lot bigger in the next few weeks. But this whole pathway looks really pretty because it is a lot of green foliage everywhere. The only downside is that because this is on the side of the house, I don't come over here as often, and the birds know that. And so the birds are always here eating all of the fruit. So that's the only annoying part. But this year, I hope to just keep an eye on Fig Alley a lot better than I did in the past so that I can get a lot more fruit. And this is the last fig tree and the only fig tree that I kind of sort of lost last year, but not really. This tree used to be as tall as all the other ones, but the tree got so burnt last year that it started dying back. It's kind of hard to tell, but I cut the main trunk back quite a bit. I kept this one so that it could take its place. And now I just go through and I take off any additional shoots that start popping out so that we only get one trunk. And then I'll just leave that there to add more life to the soil. So Fig Alley is looking pretty good, a little bit messy, a lot of leaves on the floor, but that'll be easy to clean up. And I think that's basically it. That's a tour of the garden right now. There might be a few plants here and there that I missed, but I think for the most part, you have a good idea of what it looks like at the beginning of March. That way, by the end of the month, you can see how much it changes. And you can also compare the difference from March to April. So I'll try and do this every single time I come out here to garden, just because it gives me an opportunity to give you a mini garden tour, and also to also document what the garden is looking like, because there's been times when I go back through my older files to look for some B-roll, and then I see the garden and I'm like, what? I don't remember it being so little, being such a baby, and now it looks so much different than it did 3 years ago, and even a year ago it looks significantly more different. So once the rest of the shade cloth goes up, I feel like the garden is just going to continue transforming and evolving, and oh, it's going to look crazy. It's going to look a good kind of crazy, like surreal. It's going to look surreal.